WNN. Still working off the ham and the eggnog and the biscuits and certainly everything that came with an incredible holiday weekend in Southern California. Certainly for me, from stretching back to some San Diego roots and my family there, to playing the most bizarre football game in the most bizarre circumstances with a rookie quarterback with all of this on the line. Luke, I am still, as a Ravens fan who has the purple lights strung up, and I probably should string some Festivus lights up behind us here in the studio because I do have them lying around, all these rope lights from 2001 or whenever I bought them. It is the most unlikely year right now, right? The way this whole thing is unfolded for, let's say, your holiday meal and how the conversation probably unfolded over the weekend after what happened on Saturday night. I think the Ravens are on the tongues of people now, whether they show up 70,000 strong and whether Ray comes out and does the Ray dance. I don't know what's going to happen on Sunday or how they're going to play, but it's certainly they have snatched something out of the most unlikely season in a lot of ways.
Well, there's no question about it. I mean, if you go into the beginning of the season, go back to early September, and you say that the Ravens, having a 3-game losing streak into the bye, will also lose Joe Flacco for 4 games, you're saying, well, it's going to be a 4th straight year without a playoff appearance. I mean, that's just the way it's looking, and that's not a shot at Lamar Jackson or anyone else. It's just the circumstances. And to see this turnaround in the way that it has, with it really being a complementary effort. I mean, so much attention's been paid to how the offense has played, how the running game has been revitalized, having Lamar Jackson on the field, 11-on-11 football. We've talked about that over and over and over, but this team has raised its play in every phase, including the special teams. Remember how much we were talking about the mediocrity of the special teams over the first half of the season. And a couple hiccups aside, it's been much, much, much better since the bye week. And I still point to the defense more than anything else. I mean, this defense has been absolutely terrific. I think other than maybe the Chicago Bears because of their propensity for forcing turnovers, it's been the best in the NFL. Certainly it's been the best in terms of scoring and total yards allowed.
Isn't that unlikely unto itself that we would be talking about the team in that way? Like that we would have on August 15th said, yeah, Christmas week they will be the number 1 defense in the National Football League. I would have said, well, I hope they're 9-6, right? I would have said that. I would have thought Flacco would have been the quarterback of a 9-6 football team, right? I would have thought that some combination of Snead, Brown, Crabtree, one of these tight ends. I guess we would have been talking about Collins, right? If we're talking about the difference from where we were in August. But I don't know that we really thought this was a number 1 defense in any way unless some monster emerged that Matt Judon turned into, I don't know, J.J. Watt or so. I'm just making that up. But we would have had to have seen dynamic, emerging, Ed Reedy, Ray Lewis-y kind of play. And maybe we are at a Marlon Humphrey, right? There are some statistical numbers on Marlon Humphrey to back up that he is headed toward that sort of Champ Bailey, down a different pathway of Revis or like that being that kind of player. Maybe he'll become that player. But if he were, he would have 8 picks by now, right? Or maybe they would stop throwing to him, which maybe they will stop throwing toward him. But I would say this, for player by player, age by age, Suggs by Weddle, Mosley by Brandon Williams, and all of the accompanying parts of it, I don't know that we would have predicted number 1 defense out of this in August.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with that a little bit. I mean, let's face it, this defense has been really good still, statistically speaking. Now, we can talk about high leverage spots.
Yeah, the big play, right?
Inability to finish games, and we've even seen that this year. Let's face it. I mean, you go back to Kansas City and what happened at the end of that one in overtime. But as far as number 1, I'll agree with you from the standpoint of there isn't a Ray Lewis in his prime on this football team. There isn't an Ed Reed in his prime on this football team. There isn't even a Terrell Suggs type of player in his prime. You just mentioned it. Marlon Humphrey is as close as it gets, and I wouldn't quite put him in that elite tier just yet. He might kind of be in that next tier down where this year I might have said he's a Pro Bowl alternate. That's kind of where I'd put him. Maybe a Pro Bowl player. But that's where I've said all year long, to me, you have to give such credit to Wink Martindale. And it's not as though the cupboard's bare. Let me be very clear about that. The depth is probably the most impressive aspect of this defense from a personnel standpoint. But
well, then what you just did was gave Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta and Joe, all of them, Joe, George, everybody, a lot of credit then to say that they have built a defense worthy of the caliber of being a number one defense in any era and any time. I mean, we're not measuring ourselves against the Steel Curtain here, right? Or measuring ourselves against the 0-1 Ravens. We're measuring ourselves against the 2018 National Football League, right?
Sure.
And whether this defense is going to be able to hold serve against Baker Mayfield this week, and then hold serve against, I guess, Phillip Rivers or maybe Mahomes, depending on how that goes this week, and coming in here next week, and then take the thing on the road somehow and beat Tom Brady, beat Houston down there, go out to Kansas City, maybe have to go back out to Los Angeles again in Carson. I mean, all of that is still sitting there, and we'll get into that because there's so much to talk about here in such a short week with everything on the line and Black Monday and coaches and John Harbaugh and whether he has a real deal or not. But this is one of the juiciest seasons where, we were sitting around here Halloween and talking about Harbaugh being gone, Flacco being washed up, and, woe is us, and what kind of draft pick are we going to get? And all of a sudden, we're going to get a really lousy draft pick, and nobody's really concerned about it right now,
Yeah, and, I mean, I'll give them a compliment, but a backhanded one, because, quite frankly, I've been beating the drum for the last 4 or 5 years. They've gone defense in the draft. They've brought in defensive free agents like Tony Jefferson, who, I'd have to say, 2 years into that contract, even though he's had a better season this year than last year, I'd say it's been underwhelming.
And they loved him. You know what I mean? Like, the part of it is he was the kind of player they never went out and sort of day one and identified and targeted because they never had the money to do that. They were so worried about keeping Ed Reed and Todd Heap and Haloti, keeping the guys that they actually drafted, which was the formula, that when they bring a guy like that in, I think your expectation is, whoa, like they gave him what? How much from the outside? And boy, he's going to be a difference maker. And I think part of that is they saw him as being a solid guy that could make them a number one defense, right? I mean, if the goal is to be a number one defense, then they certainly have accomplished that, and that's an amazing thing to me.
Yeah, but I'm not going to forget the last few years because they also had to change gears in the middle of the season because they didn't put together an offensive line that could run block in a traditional manner. That needed a Lamar Jackson on the field just to be able to run the football. That's a problem. When you put together
benching a capable $25 million quarterback, literally.
Yeah, I mean, literally. But so there's always there are always hidden costs. There's always a give and take here. So where they stand right now, and I will not forget about some of those issues. And when the day comes that they trade Joe Flacco or release him or however this winds up this offseason, I'm going to be writing that. I hope they've learned their lesson, and I hope they do a much better job building an offense around Lamar Jackson, but bringing it back to the present and acknowledging that part of this discussion, they've finally validated to some degree the resources that they pumped into the defense. But that said, you still look at this defense top to bottom, and I still will say it's greater than the sum of the parts. You have individuals on this team that are multiple-time Pro Bowl players on the wrong side of 30 that are very much past their prime, but still bring some level of value. You have a middle linebacker in C.J. Mosley who's been to the Pro Bowl 4 out of the last 5 years, but we still debate his greatness as far as whether this team is going to invest a long-term contract in him that's going to pay him upwards of, I don't know, $11, $12, $13 million a year. And
I mean, name me the game that C.J. Mosley took over. You know what I mean? Like, Ray Lewis had these defining plays and games and all sorts of things. That's going to be the harder part on C.J. Mosley, or quite frankly, a lot of players, right? I don't know that there have been. We talk about Tavon making a play the other day, or Peanut. These guys who were just role players, and
Yeah.
Zach Orr was supposed to be the guy, right? I mean, he was certainly the emerging guy that was sort of snuffed out. And they've had some bad fortune in a lot of cases on stuff like that. And they've also, to the offensive line, and I always go back to this, I was watching Kelechi Osemele play the other night for the Raiders and saying to myself, they grew some players that wound up getting paid elsewhere, and that's to their genius to some degree that they don't ever really get any credit for.
Well, I think they get credit, but at the same time, you lose offensive linemen, you got to replace them, and so at times the quality hasn't been there. So it hasn't been perfect. I'm not.
As an organization, you only get credit when you win games in January.
Sure,
they haven't done that in a long time.
And that's the point,
right?
As much as everyone should be excited, and believe me, anyone listening right now, you should be excited. This has been a really good run, and I think if this team takes care of business on Sunday, they have as reasonable of a chance as anyone, other than Kansas City, because Kansas City, to me, is top to bottom year or week 1 through week 16. Even though they didn't get the job done against Seattle on Sunday night, they've been the best team in the AFC. But that said, I don't think they're infallible. I don't think they're a team that can't be beaten, and I think the Ravens they showed that they can certainly compete with a team like that. But all of that being said, this can also go away on Sunday, and we could be having the same exact discussion. So I am excited about where this team is right now. I am intrigued by the possibility, the potential of them making a run, although I'm not going to sit here and say that they're the favorites. And I think some of the talk about, no one wants to play them. Well, it's the playoffs. Everyone's good. Let's remember that. Let's not just sit here and act like this is a birthright. They've been there once since the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl was 6 years ago. It's a long time ago. So relish this, enjoy it, but it doesn't mean that everything is fine. And I think we could even talk about where John Harbaugh is right now, and that announcement. Well, I
got a list here. I have a long list of things we got to get to. Luke Jones is here. All of our WNST programming brought to you by so many of our sponsors. First off, I'm wearing my Rush shirt today, Luke, because it's Boxing Day. I want to honor the Canadian in me, and so I'm wearing that. But in the post-holiday spirit, we get so many sponsors who are holiday-oriented, including our friends at Charles Newsonoff & Sons. Big thank you to Sydney for always sponsoring us and being with us. Since 1923, true love comes in all shapes and sizes. I guess this is the time I start talking about Valentine's Day, right, Sid? Charles Newsonoff & Sons, find them at charlesnewsonoff.com. They also buy gold. My friends, Lee Tessier and the Lee Tessier team selling my condo. They could be selling your home. If you're in the real estate place and you're buying or selling, thinking about it, you're going to need a realtor. Think about our friends at Lee Tessier. Go to leetessier.com to learn more about what they do. I'm filling up with the Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast Tacona blend in my Cole Roofing mug here today. Royal Farms, out there, of course, with the best fried chicken in the land, as well as the Western fries. Make sure you're using the Rofo app or the rewards card. When you're gassing up, you'll get your Rofo chicken free of charge. Also, a shout-out to Billy Cole and Cole Roofing. He'll be giving me some incredible Dr. Melfi work here this week as I sit on the couch with him on a potential home game with the Browns, and maybe people will come to the game. So Luke, I know you want to keep it on the field, but what is your expectation for this week? Because it's been the strangest season all the way around, right? Like, I've eaten $1,500 in tickets already this year, right? Like, it's embarrassing how much money I've literally eaten in tickets. Like, could not give them away, could not kindle them. You've been there, I've been there. My wife got sick 2 weeks ago, couldn't go. We'll be out in full force on Sunday. It's been a very strange couple of years for fandom in our town, and I don't know where it winds up, and I don't know how this crests over the next week or two. I do know the ball better not go over Eric Weddle's head, with a minute and a half left to go. And Brashad Perryman better not, high point one and pull it down and lose by a field goal in a 3-fumble marred afternoon where they get ousted, right? I mean, that would create an ugly Bisciotti press conference, an ugly Harbaugh thing, an ugly ending for Joe Flacco. What if Flacco has to come out and bail out their season at 6:45 on Sunday night because somehow Baker Mayfield's slitting their throats and they're down 27-10? You know, I don't know, but all of that's out there, right? Like, that soap opera is, dude, the way this roller coaster is going, we're going into a tunnel here now, right? Like, the tunnel is, we now have expectations, right? Like, they better win. They better have a home playoff game. The Steelers aren't in their way anymore, and they better not back in and need Cincinnati's help at 7 o'clock on Sunday. So all of this is played out this week on the backside of Christmas. But I'll say this, I mean, I think they're going to win this week, and then I think they're going to play a home game. And by the way, I'm not convinced it's not going to be Kansas City next week because I'm not convinced that Kansas City's not going to burp against Oakland, who's playing better. And I'm not convinced that San Diego – by the way, Denver stinks. So to me, San Diego's got a much better chance of winning this week. And I would say that on the push and pull of all of this as to whether the Colts and Tennessee are going to get in. I mean, I'm looking at all of these games. I mean, Jim Nantz and Tony Romo are coming here for this game, right? Like, this is that big a game as far as CBS feels about it, and they're all interesting in their own ways in the way the league stacks these games schedule-wise. But I am not convinced that, like, it's chalk and just Kansas City just wins and, it's just going to be San Diego and the Browns are just going to come in here and roll the ball out and we're just going to waltz to a 31-14 win or something. I think this is going to be a tense Sunday afternoon here. I mean, in a lot of ways, for a lot of people with a lot riding on it, and then you win, and then there's next week. And this is when everything gets turned up to 11 a little bit for the Heat, because this is when all of it matters, and this is when Lamar Jackson can't turn into Andy Dalton, I don't know, right? Or, Matt Stafford or the guy that doesn't win January games. This is where Joe was special. He always won these kind of games,
Well, he was, but that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago in a fantasy far, far away, right?
Yeah.
It was 3 contracts ago for Harbaugh, right?
I'll agree with everything you said other than Kansas City's not losing to Oakland at home. I mean, come on.
All right.
If that were in Oakland and, then, okay, maybe I could see something strange happening, but let's keep this focus on the Cleveland Browns.
Fair enough.
The Browns have won 5 of their last 6, just like the Ravens. I mean, I know that they haven't played a murderer's row of games, but until Saturday night, the Ravens hadn't beaten anyone of note since the bye week. They had played close with Kansas City. So let's not take Baker Mayfield and the Browns lightly here. I mean, this for as much as there is excitement, and to go back to your original question, I do think we'll see a fuller stadium, but it's always strange when you're talking about between Christmas and New Year's, and I still think there's something to be said that this hasn't all been about wins and losses, and I think there have been other issues at work, and I think a lot of those issues are league-wide. I think some of these issues go beyond football in the city of Baltimore. So I don't think it's fixed. I don't think it's automatic that it's just going to be a 71,000 full capacity kind of crowd on Sunday, but I think it's going to be fuller. I think it's going to be a better crowd. I think you're not going to see the large chunks of empty seats to the degree that we have.
And by the way, you know what I'm doing right now? Like, literally, because I didn't do this during Christmas or when I was out in California running around, I'm checking the weather because, I didn't have to check the weather in 2001 when Denver came in here, right? Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to check the weather when Houston came in here, in their red uniforms. But you have to check the weather now to find out whether people are going to come, because we know one thing: if it's cold and wet and awful, people don't want to in 2019, which is where we're headed this week, come out and sit in it. By the way, 41 and cloudy Sunday, apparently like Friday and Saturday, very nice around here, a little bit of rain, but warmer. But, I mean, it's going to be 38 degrees. It's the sun's going to have set, or it's going to be in the 30s, but dry. On Sunday. So it's football weather. It's a playoff game. Literally, right?
Yeah. So
this is the first playoff game.
I think they'll get a spike. I don't think it's going to be an automatic. Can't find a seat. Secondary markets are going for $300 a pop or anything crazy like that. But I think they'll see a spike, and then of course, playoff tickets go on sale this week. I saw a few people comment, and when we put out the press release that the Ravens released about tickets going on sale Wednesday morning, people were saying, "Oh, they're getting arrogant." No, they're trying to sell tickets. If you haven't noticed, they've had an empty stadium or 20,000 empty seats. Some of these games.
Yeah, how early is too early to start selling baseball tickets? Yeah. Christmas is over, and you still can't buy an Orioles ticket. So,
and that's another discussion we talked about. But this is the reality of. And it's
dude, it's a $75 ticket right now, or $80 ticket. I mean, it's a face value get-in for this week. So that's the asking price, right?
Which is better than it's been,
right.
But not where we were 8-9 years ago. This kind of a game. So,
by the way, Section 513, only 7 tickets on sale right now. So, hey, 513 still in the house. We're going to get rowdy on Sunday, I think.
Right. Everyone show up. But I mean,
too old to get rowdy.
You have to take this by this is a step-by-step kind of proposition. I mean, in the same way that one of the reasons that I heard a lot of fans talk about, not all, but some talked about, well, people were kind of tired of Joe Flacco and the offense being so blah. Well, Lamar Jackson had started the last 3 home games, and there were still empty seats for those games. So you can't tell me it was all about Joe Flacco. And not that was, not that I would have agreed with that anyway. But there are many variables at work here. I think certainly the Ravens being in this position, although I'll remind everyone they were in the same exact position last year, albeit for a wild card rather than the division, but this can all, this can turn sideways, or they can win and they have a home playoff game. And whether it's the Chargers or whoever coming to town, you would hope that there's, it goes another step from what this week is. This week, let's say there's just for argument's sake, there's 65,000 butts in seats for the game. And you hope you sell out a playoff game, and then you see what happens after that. So, I mean, it's certainly encouraging. It's certainly more exciting than it's been. But, again, we always have this kind of recency bias just to say that, it's different this time. Well, they needed to win Week 17 last year. 2 years ago, it was Week 16, and they took Pittsburgh down to the final second. So it's not as though this team hasn't been in this atmosphere. It hasn't been in this environment. They haven't broken through. You hope that Saturday night, because they hadn't scored a win like that they did against the Chargers, you hope that that's the sign of the breakthrough, and they've kind of broken the proverbial glass ceiling, if you want to label it that way, and now they can be as dangerous as anyone else. But you have to take care of business Sunday, and I'll continue to say, and I said this back in Week 5 when we were still very much viewing the Browns as the Browns, and now seeing that they're a football team that's a win away from being over 500 and a win away from being, a half game behind the Ravens? 8-7-1 compared to 9-7.
I mean, a very capable team, right? And that's what, of all of these games, the reason that Jim Nantz is in here is I think they believe the Ravens are the most ripe team for an upset, right? Like, literally, that this will be the best game of the other games. Obviously, they've flexed out the win in your in game to the evening, but football thinks this is the best game of the day.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I'd say that's reasonable. I mean, you have the Sunday night game between Tennessee and the Colts, which is the wild card, championship game or play-in game, whatever you want to call it. But you go down the list, and I mean, I see the point spread. It's kind of been Ravens a 6-point favorite. That's and the home team usually gets 3. They're not viewing this as a complete cakewalk. They're expecting the Ravens to win, but they need to take care of business.
Kansas City's 13.5. Pittsburgh's 14.5.
Yeah,
the Chargers are 6.5 in Denver. So most of these games, Philadelphia's 6.5 at Washington, Minnesota's 5 at home, Chicago of the games that matter. Dallas is 6.5. Giants. So there's certainly some interesting numbers, but I think as far as where Lamar Jackson is, where this defense is, the closeness of the game, I think America is expecting that at 7 o'clock, everyone with purple underwear on is going to be a little nervous. And I fully expect that I will be joining you with 13 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter of a game that's a one play, one score, one mistake, one turnover, one spectacular play away from defining the season. And that hasn't gone well. I mean, year after year after year, because that's the position you're in. You're going to be in the position playing a capable football team in a close game, as the lights go down while you're also scoreboard watching and Pittsburgh is enjoying their 31-16 lead or whatever it'll be. And the game will be on the line and the ball will be going up in the air and the roar of the crowd will be now. I mean, I feel it all, Luke, and I'm not just saying it to make the hair on the back of my neck stand up, but that's what this is going to be on Sunday.
Sure. Well, and let's be very realistic about this. Even you can fully expect the Ravens to win on Sunday, and I do expect them to win on Sunday. But each of these 6 games since the bye week has been a one-score game at least early in the fourth quarter. I mean, as much as we're talking about this win over the Chargers and the final score 22-10, okay, you say, well, that was a one-possession game, a one Phillip Rivers drive away from the Ravens losing a game that they had thoroughly controlled when you look at it from a statistical standpoint. So even just looking at it through that lens, this is going to be a close game. The Ravens, the way they play right now, they have a ball control, run-heavy offense. They're hoping, and this is where I go back to what I said to you probably about a month ago, when we were only a couple games into this revamped rushing attack, this Lamar Jackson era. At the time, we didn't know it was the official start or whether I labeled it the soft opening. But we talked about this kind of being a bizarro version of the 2000 Ravens, and think about how they profile. Now, there isn't a Jamal Lewis back, but the overall production is very Jamal Lewis-esque as far as just how much they're relying on it. And in the passing game, what was it that Brian Billick always talked about? You need to get that offensive explosion, right? You need to get that big play. Well, Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews delivered that on Saturday night. But even with that said, this was a one-score game with under 3 minutes to go, and that's been the case in most of these games. Even the Oakland game that ended up looking lopsided on the scoreboard at the very end. Remember, that was because of a punt return and a defensive touchdown. So it's not as though the Ravens are built right now to blow anyone out. And when you look at how the Browns have played, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson won. I mean, like, let's think about this. This could be the first of, I don't know, if both of these guys end up being franchise guys, we're going to be seeing Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson for
8 more times at least.
Decade, maybe. Maybe in the playoffs. I mean, that's an exciting thing just as a football fan. If we're kind of looking at it from the 30,000 feet view, kind of looking at this from a big picture kind of standpoint. But bringing it back to what Sunday means, this is a Browns team that has been better in virtually every phase of the game since they canned Hugh Jackson. And say what you want about Greg Williams and his past and his prospects of whether he's going to have a shot at keeping that job or not, but they've played really good football overall. And it hasn't been, they're not a juggernaut. I don't want to sit here and inflict the fear of God into anyone and say that the Browns are like this unbelievable football team, but they're absolutely capable of coming into Baltimore and beating the Ravens.
And extremely motivated, like a little different than where Arizona or Denver. Dude, I've watched a lot of football here, right? And there are a couple of these teams that we see every year that just look left for dead to some degree, right? And I mean, Miami, Jackson, some of these teams you would say, well, they're, maybe they're just not good enough this week, or maybe they can up and bite you in the butt, but the Browns are a cut above that right now in my mind, that if the season started all over again today, I'd say maybe they can win 10 games if they had the right schedule and the right set of breaks, right?
Yeah, and let me just give you some perspective. I'm going to give you some football nerdom right here. Football Outsiders is a site that they run formulas and algorithms that kind of give you an overall profile.
And we have Aaron Schatz on all the time. And by the way, he's on my hit list because his site did run a great piece that I know you're referring to right now. So go for it.
But I'm just to give you some perspective on the Cleveland Browns. Football Outsiders earlier this week their big stat that they have. It's kind of like their equivalent to WAR in baseball, but it's called DVOA. And it's just basically a percentage that kind of gives you how much better by a percent this team is than the average team, or how much worse. To give you some perspective, weeks 11 through 16, so we're talking since the bye week for the Ravens. Right now, the Ravens are second overall in DVOA, behind only New Orleans. Okay, I'll buy that, right? Guess where Cleveland is right now since week 11?
Since week 11,
so
the
DVOA.
So wow.
Now, that's not to say that I think they're the fourth best team in the NFL, and I don't think Football Outsiders believes they're the fourth best team in the NFL. No one's saying that, but it speaks to how much better they are playing since early in the season, and a lot of that goes to Baker Mayfield. Much of that goes to what's a really weird defense in the standpoint that if you look at them statistically, you say, okay, well, they really stink. You know, they've certain situational kind of football, they play much better than the stats look. So I'll just throw that out there. And if the Browns
they lost two games in overtime, right? Like, so I mean, they've played. They lost another. They lost to the Saints in New Orleans by a field goal to start the season and held them to 21 points. So they're not capable. But they've had a nice little schedule thing, like the Ravens had that last year where they missed some quarterbacks and stuff. I mean, it's nice seeing a banged up version of the Panthers where Cam Newton can't play. It's nice seeing the Denver Broncos and the Bengals in these weeks where they are horrific. So there is a little bit of that. I mean, they had the Bengals twice in the last 5 weeks, and
no doubt.
The Bengals have been a mess. So they've had that going on, and that's been to their benefit to be 7-7-1. But I throw all that out the window because this is a real statement game for where they are, for Greg Williams, for the organization, for all those players who are probably going to outlast Greg Williams, because I don't know that he's going to keep the job. I guess if you get beyond Bounty Gate and you hire him to begin with and you prop him up as a head coach and he starts winning games because, they're only 5-1, there's a lot of reasons to maybe keep him around there and not go on the next search. But who knows what Dorsey's going to do there. But they have players there that we're going to see next year, not just Baker Mayfield. They have players there, and we should all be a little concerned about their emergence after a decade of dormancy.
Oh, there's no doubt. The entire AFC North should be on notice that the Browns aren't going to be the doormats of this division anymore. I don't believe that they will be. I think, to your point, and I've been a guy that's kind of talked about the fact that they've had, and I've even had people laugh at me, and they probably should have, considering they were 1-32 the last 2 years going into 2018. But anyone that was watching that team saw that they had some talented players, whether you're talking about a Myles Garrett or, of course, they bring in Denzel Ward this year, and you look at some of the offensive linemen that they added over the last couple of years in free agency, and it's not a final product. It's not a great football team yet by any stretch of the imagination, but they're not a joke anymore. And if they didn't already have your attention, I'm telling you right now, if you're listening, the Browns should have your attention because they're fully capable of ruining the Ravens' New Year's and sending this team into a
nothing makes those people happier than wrecking our New Year. That's the one thing the Browns have never really done is effed us up on a playoff. You know what I mean? They've always been the one you can count on. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And this
Browns,
is their one chance to really F up our lives. And they would talk about it for years. Remember when the Orioles had nothing and they effed up the Red Sox lives that one night, and that's all everybody had to hang on to that made, Buck, the anointing of Buck was just screwing up the Red Sox? That's where the Browns are after 1-31. 1-31, and you screwed up the Ravens season in Baltimore by beating their rookie quarterback and sending him home crying. Boy, that Baker Mayfield lives to do that sort of thing. And by the way, so does Jarvis Landry, amongst others, right?
Sure. And that would make the Browns 8-7-1 and give them their first winning record since, 2007 off the top of my head? I think they were 9-7 that year.
You think Rashad Perryman's a little worked up this week? You think?
Yeah, sure. I already said to you, I don't know if I said it over the air, the doomsday scenario is Baker Mayfield throwing a deep ball to Rashad Perriman to knock the Ravens out of the playoffs. I'm not trying to make anyone drive off the road saying that, but you can't tell me that if you're thinking of the worst case scenario, that would be it, right?
Yes.
And it's not to sit here and say that the Ravens are going to lose, but they need to be ready to play, and that really speaks to how much they'd like to see a packed house. And I mean, this is a playoff game, just like Saturday night was a playoff game. I mean, we said it going into Week 16 that the Ravens weren't going to be in a position to make the playoffs if they didn't win out, and that's kind of the way it's played out, right? I mean, they have to win on Sunday because, like you said, you can't count on getting any help from the Bengals. I mean, they're a big-time underdog in Pittsburgh, as they should be, because that's been a lousy football team since mid-October. This is the one year. I mean, think about it. How many years have the Ravens finished up with Cincinnati and the Steelers have finished up with the Browns? And we always said, what? Oh, my goodness. I mean, that seems a little unfair. That seems like fortunate timing for Pittsburgh and not so fortunate for the Ravens. But this is the one year where Pittsburgh's happy to have the Bengals in town opposed to the Browns, because they'd be in the same exact boat if Baker Mayfield was coming to Heinz Field. So it's just be on alert. That's the overall message. And the Ravens, the good news is, even though you can kind of look at this Week 17 game and say, well, the Browns scare you a little bit more than the Bengals did last year, Week 17, but I think the Ravens are a much more formidable football team than they were last year, even though they have a very similar profile from a record standpoint. They were 4-5 at the bye last year. They went into Week 17 needing a win to clinch a playoff berth and a 10-6 season. So it's very similar in that regard, but I think the Ravens are a better football team. And I think, even though the schedule up until the last couple of weeks hadn't been all that imposing, hadn't been all that challenging, they've still taken care of their business. And I think if they win on Sunday, then this can go as long as they want it to go. I could see anything happening. I could see them losing in the wild card round, or I could see them getting all the way to the AFC Championship. You just never know. And I'll remind everyone, as we had our post-game reaction, I think back to where the Ravens were in 2008. They won that game against Dallas in Week 16, and then they beat Jacksonville in Week 17, got in at 11-5. No one was expecting the Ravens to go to the AFC Championship at that point, because you had Joe Flacco, this rookie quarterback, in the same way that we're talking about Lamar Jackson, a rookie quarterback, and before you know it, they were winning on the road in Miami and beating Tennessee, the number 1 seed, and going to Pittsburgh and being in it until the fourth quarter there. So you never know what's going to happen, but you can't talk about all those other possibilities. You can dream about it a little bit now, but you still need a win to make that possibility a reality from the standpoint of being in the tournament and seeing your Baltimore on the bracket and who they're hosting, Chargers or whoever it is. So it's exciting, but they still have one more step to go, and that's why they should be in full-blown playoff mode at this point, because that's what it is.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. Reminder, we're out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day through the holiday, through the weekend, getting you ready for New Year's, and certainly getting you ready for the Ravens and the Browns. Don't forget, our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, making the New Year's resolution right. $5 down, $10 a month. It's the best deal going. There's a Planet Fitness right around the corner from you. Last but never least, all breaking news happens first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford, Security Boulevard. Dennis Colazzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home, getting you ready for the weekend with the Sunday Sports Voice, as well as out on Twitter. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net anytime, anywhere. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.